Webster.
Good morning. We're going to give you two states of two different nations. First, the state of the nation as seen through the eyes of Ed Broadbent, the national leader of the new Democratic Party. And I don't know how much doom and gloom he is going to give us unless social democratic policies are introduced into this country right away. The other state of the nation is more localized. It's the state of the National Parole Board, whose image at this particular moment, right or wrong, is not good. And with me this morning later will be Bill Outerbridge, the chairman of the National Parole Board. But first it's going to be Ed Broadbent and the NDP and how we can fight our way out of our current problems in this country after the break. Completely off the topic, Mr. Broadbent. We'll dispose of it in one question. We're going to do this with all political leaders. We recently went through an absolutely horrifying trial and conviction for mass murder of a shocker whose name I can't even mention. Can you argue against capital punishment for a man who premeditatedly, while sane, killed 11 youngsters?
Yes. It's a monstrous crime. It deserves punishment. But if you believe that it is morally wrong to kill, especially in a brutal way, all those young people, you can, for me, simultaneously believe it's morally wrong for the state to kill even a man who's done such a horrible thing.
But we're all dreadful hypocrites, because when and if he is killed by another prisoner in one of our prisons, everybody will say, thank God, justice at last has been done.
Well, some people will say that. I won't say it about killing any human being.
Fair enough, we'll leave that right there, but I felt I had to raise it. How bad is the state of this nation, clinically speaking just now, not politically speaking? Are we on the edge of a very severe recession?
Absolutely. I hate the gloom and doom stuff, but on the way here in the car this morning, I heard the most recent forecast about what's happening in the United States, and for the sixth quarter in a row, there's been no growth in the United States. That means what they're saying is that instead of the anticipated upswing that Alan McKechnie and the Liberals are relying on to bail us out, it ain't going to come, to put it bluntly. And that means, like West Germany, like France, like other countries, it's, to put it equally bluntly, damn well time we start taking independent action in Canada, or we're going to be in very, very severe trouble.
Independent action from your point of view, succinctly. Is there anything, in fact, that a federal government in this country can do to influence international interest rates, to start house building, and to put, what, 1.5 million people back to work?
Two things right away on the sectors you mentioned. So relevant here in BC, of course, is we've said the banks have had abysmally high profits in 1981, 1.8 billion. We say that we need an excess profits tax on them. They benefited from high interest rates. Use 500 million of that to stimulate the housing industry and create some 93,000 jobs. Secondly, interest rates, yes, they can be brought down.
Arbitrarily by this country?
Arbitrarily. I mean, the government now, ever since Mr. Diefenbaker's days, has had the legislative authority to bring down interest rates. We should do it. And I say to you, again, totally frankly, if that should result in an export of capital from here to the United States, because some people would rather put money in shopping centers in Houston or Los Angeles, then we would say, put on controls over the export of that capital, just as the Americans did in the 1960s and 70s to protect their dollar. So we need low interest rates to stimulate the economy. If it results in an outflow of capital, then for that limited period of time, put controls on that.
All right, let's just go through that one at a time. You've got this paranoia about the banks.
Paranoia. No, some of us would say reasonable, fair tax approach about the banks.
How much was the profit? What were the profits last year?
They were 1.2 $1.8 billion.
You would institute an excess profit tax and cream them of 700 million.
Right.
And put 500 million into housing.
Let me put that in context. That would still leave them with $1 billion profit. It would tax them at the level of taxes, in percentage terms, they were paying back in 1970. So it would tax them at the same level that their lowest employees are paying taxes. So it would give us money to do something that's needed, like providing jobs here in the logging industry, provide homes for people in Vancouver and all over the province, and be still fair to the banks.
But mind you, knowing what you may or may not know about the BC logging and lumber industry, you realize that if the dollar were at 50 cents today, we still couldn't sell lumber because there's no market.
There's a big problem, absolutely. And anyone that comes in here, whether from my party or any other party, that says when you have such a high percentage of your logging business determined by conditions in the U.S., you're going to turn that around overnight. This is crazy. But it's one thing to say, yes, it's going to take some time, and especially in that instance, for the American market to pick up. To conclude from that, as Trudeau and McKechnie are, that there's nothing we can do is just intellectually bankrupt and morally irresponsible of the people of Canada. Because there are things, you know, if we built 220,000 additional housing units this year, which is what we need in Canada, that would provide some real stimulation.
What would the
here in
prices
BC.
be? And if you brought interest rates down, we'll say just for the sake of argument, to 12%, there'd be another inflationary surge all the way, wages would go up again, we'd be caught in the same bind.
I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. When you're operating at way below capacity, when you have massive unemployment in the construction industry, when you have a shortage of supply in housing, just the opposite to inflation would occur. You put people back to work who are unemployed,
Right.
You'd increase the supply of housing, and if anything, that would cause the price to come down.
Next question. What are the actual unemployment figures? The last ones I saw in the Globe and Mail were 1.1 million.
No, closer real figure is 1.8 because the official government statistics don't include all those people who have been out of work for 4 weeks or more who say they haven't looked for a job in the last couple of weeks. They haven't looked for jobs in many places.
1.8, you're getting close to 2 million unemployed.
That's true. It's almost 10 million in the U.S.
This is your estimate, 1.8.
That's right.
Bit high, isn't it?
It's more than a bit high. It's disastrous.
All right, now, what about pulling in the belt and buckling down and increasing productivity? Is that not your message to the workers of Canada?
It's increasing productivity, but it's also in increasing manufacturing jobs. Let me say that's the particular stress that we're talking about now in Canada. We have a $21 billion deficit in manufactured goods every year. Translated into jobs, that's 200,000 jobs. Here in BC, two major industries are forestry and mining. We have more than $100 million deficit that's more than 100,000 job deficit related to the dollar value deficit in machinery goods in mining and forestry products. If we started to lay down conditions here with multinational companies, if government procurement policy went to Canadian firms, we would be getting that mining machinery produced in Canada, we'd be getting that forestry machinery produced in Canada. But unlike all the other governments in Western Europe or Japan, we have governments that have been indifferent to that.
Well, let me give you a good lead on that one. Northeast Coal, which is supposed to be going ahead full scale, will not be shipped in Canadian vessels at all. 2 giant tankers or carriers are being built in Belgium and Korea.
Absolutely.
Now, is this bad?
It is bad. In principle, when you think after World War II, we had one of the largest merchant marine fleets in the world. Dave Barrett has said recently in British Columbia, I agree totally, our party at the national level said we should negotiate a deal when we ship coal to Japan. A certain percentage of that should be carried in Canadian bottoms with Canadian crews. But in addition, we should get a manufacturing spin-off. Who's going to be building, for example, the new facility at Prince Rupert? Is it a Canadian firm? No, it's Mitsubishi that came in with an offer, in my understanding, that was $1 million above in cost, that was going to take 2 months longer to meet the contract deadlines, that was going to provide, I think, only 50%, a little more than 50% Canadian content and labor.
Correct.
A Canadian firm, lower price, a faster deadline, 96% Canadian labor doesn't get the contract. I think that's disgusting.
I mean, you and Trudeau aren't that far apart, you know.
What do you mean we're not
You're
there?
not. Oh, well, you get into bed with them every now and again when it suits you, the NDP party.
Let me cut you off right there.
No, but
let me cut you
you're
off.
certainly closer to him than the Tories.
Do you know what the vote is since last October in terms of voting with the Liberals, the Tories versus the NDP? 23 votes since October. The Tories have voted with the Liberals. Only 13 times has the NDP voted with the Liberals. And the most recent one was last week. A bill that's important here on the West Coast, technically C-48, concerned with offshore drilling.
Mm-hmm.
The Tories, who did they vote with? They voted with the Liberals. We voted against it. Why? Because we wanted Canadian content provisions in offshore drilling equipment. We wanted clear definitions of what a spill was. And the Tories excluded all that. It's the Tories who prop up the Liberals twice as often as we do.
I must be thinking about the long constitutional debate in which you were so closely allied.
And Tory propaganda.
Yeah, in one word or less.
Yeah. One word or less.
That
will be tough to do.
In one word or less, 25 words or less. Tell me right now,
yes,
Broadbent's opinion of Trudeau and how long he should stay as Prime Minister.
He should stay 24 hours. That would give him enough time now to announce a press conference. He could have that tomorrow, 24 hours from now, and say, look, I've done such a disastrous job with the potential of this country's economy, I've got to go. He's been indifferent to the economy throughout his career. He is the principal reason we're in great difficulty now.
More without Broadbent,
Speaking,
Broadbent, after the break.
Speak English, Jack. Say we want to keep them out.
I can barely get into them. Ed Broadbent, National Leader of the NDP. Premier Bennett is collecting a fair amount of kudos in British Columbia for announcing wage restraints for public sector employees. 10% plus or minus 2 plus 2% productivity. Not a bad move, is it, to put the public sector, who've kept well up with inflation in BC, in the main, under some restraints?
I think it's a terrible move. Look at, I come from a town where everyone's employed, or 90% in the private sector. Most Canadians work in the private sector. Why should we single out public servants as scapegoats? Why didn't he do, for example, if he's concerned with inflation, what Howard Pauly did just after he formed a government in Manitoba? Howard Pauly said there's a concern about interest rates. Manitoba has a lot less financial resources than BC. So he took steps to make sure that people wouldn't lose their homes. Took steps
moratorium for a year.
On interest rates. He took steps to protect farmers. He took steps to protect small businessmen who might be concerned with wage levels, but they aren't going to be so concerned if they can get a reasonable interest rate. Now, Howard Pauly did that from a social democratic point of view with far fewer financial resources, I repeat, than Bennett. So why does Bennett, I really find it offensive. Now, my brother, most people I know work in the private sector. Why should we single out public sector employees and make them scapegoats for inflation?
Well, I give you Bennett's answer. Do you mind if I give you Bennett's answer?
If you want to speak for Bill Bennett,
I'm not
Jack,
speaking for Bennett. I'm giving you his answer.
I don't mind at all.
He has a $6 billion budget, of which more than $2 billion is in health, right?
Yeah.
He can't afford it. He won't finance in any deficit manner.
Yeah.
Says we've got to pay the bills as we go. The government expenditure in the province is out of control.
Right.
He's put a 12% limit on it.
So isn't it a great answer? Instead of negotiating with the Japanese, who desperately need our coal coming from British Columbia, getting a trade-off for, say, some kind of steel facility, getting a trade-off, say, in the automotive sector, Japanese now have about 20% of our market. We have one of the most lucrative markets in the world. Instead of saying you put up an auto plant here, this is the kind of approach that would have produced tax revenue from those companies, that would have produced taxes from employees. Instead of expanding, in short, in a tough-minded way, with the manufacturing sector, he picks a scapegoat like public sector workers.
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind we're going to subsidize Japanese coal endlessly, but at least it'll give us some activity, because the Australians in South America are waiting there to sell the coal.
That's been the excuse, Jack, throughout your lifetime and my lifetime in this country, is that if we don't sell it off, they're going to get it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Well, we've always sold ourselves short. It's time we got the manufacturing jobs that could go with that resource development.
Next question. You've got a disaster in the auto industry in your very own writing. And just across the border yesterday or today, United Auto Workers have endorsed wholeheartedly no pay increase, restricted fringe benefits for the next 31 months in return for job security. Will your people in UAW in Oshawa, etc., will they follow the lead and pull in their belts?
I'll tell you, they've pulled in their belts already, because Canadian auto plants on the whole are more productive than the American auto plants. Secondly, the wage package cost for the same companies, General Motors, Chrysler, and Ford in Canada, now note this, is about $5 an hour less already in Canada than on the U.S. side, in part because they're operating with 80-cent dollars, a major part of it, in part because we have, through our better organization of our social system, provided such things as Medicare benefits that they have to pay their workers in the United States. So the same companies, I repeat, are saving about $5 an hour already on the Canadian side of the border. So why should Canadian workers, who are producing, I repeat, in our assembly plants in the whole, as efficiently or more efficiently, give up that?
Oh, that's a good answer. Haven't had that before.
Well.
Because medical costs in the States, when they're not covered by Medicare, are horrendous.
Sure, and, the companies have to pay them.
Look
to
what
their
Trudeau said the other day. Trudeau said, I'm fed up with these provincial governments. I'm just going to cut their grants. I'm not going to negotiate with them any longer. Is he aiming at really slapping big deterrents on health care in this country?
Trudeau has about as much tact as Genghis Khan in dealing with the premiers. I mean, he really, in personal attitudes, is an abomination. Governing a federal state like Canada is difficult, and one should have no illusions about that. That I don't care if I were Prime Minister and I had, as one day I hope would be the case, half the governments provincially would be NDP, there would be conflicts between the federal government and NDP governments. Gotta be. But the attitude of the Prime Minister, particularly in those circumstances, is not to be some sort of namby-pamby that would give away the whole ship, to use one of his great phrases. But you can be tough in policy in the national interest and fair-minded, but talk reasonably to people. You can stand up for the national interest without insulting them. Trudeau thinks he's got to insult everyone. He has to play this macho game, you know, say, I'm tougher than you. And what he does is that he undermines a cooperative spirit.
Is he going to smash the country eventually?
Oh, I'm not going to go that. No, we're strong as he's not going to smash the country.
What about Quebec? We're back where we were in 1968.
In what sense?
In the sense that there are no federal government, no government presence in the provincial government. We're back at the old squabbles and fights. Quebec's right on the outside, totally separated in the Constitution from the rest of the country. Isn't it?
I would hope that when the Constitution comes back, that once we have it here now with a reasonable amending formula, some of those things that Quebec still feels sensitive about, we'll get a settlement on. Again, on that, one shouldn't have any illusion. I don't think anyone was going to get an agreement with René Lévesque. He wants a very different option in Canada from the rest of us. So Trudeau can't be entirely blamed for that one.
I suppose not. Well, anyway, he was tough enough to suggest the freezing of public income sectors at the 50,000 level in Ottawa. That wasn't a bad plan, was it?
Oh, yeah, he did that after, and I say this openly to you, after MPs got a salary increase. It's very nice of him to come along.
I was just looking for my National Citizens Coalition material so I could nail you on that.
Well, never mind that propaganda. I say MPs...
It's true, though.
Well, not their nice wording. I brought up the salary issue. You didn't. So I'll also say that we hadn't had an increase since 1976.
You're now well paid.
We're now well paid. You're damn right we're well paid. All I'm saying is that Trudeau is again acting hypocritically. If he says that MPs are now who are well paid, I'll say that. I don't think too much, by the way. I think reasonably paid. But he is hypocritical if he says now that we've done that, we should come along with controls and everybody else.
You've had a 47% increase in the past 18 months.
We've had, let me put it in a different perspective. If you look at our salary increases since 1976, they've gone up something like 8% per annum since 1976, up to today.
47%.
Now that's, well, all right. Now that National Coalition doesn't like to mention that, which is below the national average. Now I ask you, does a man or woman who is responsible for the government of Canada, should he have less than 8 or 9% when all kinds of other people, whether it's baseball players or maybe even moderators of television programs might just have had salary increases more than that.
That's a cheap shot.
But never for me.
Yeah, sure it is. I was just going to point out there's something else about pensions. Oh, yeah. You used to have to wait till you were 55 to pick up your pension, and then you picked up the indexing. An MP can quit any time now and pick up his pension, right? After his 6 years.
After 6 years, but he doesn't get an indexing till after
55.
No, 60.
60 he gets his index.
Yes.
So the likes of Bassford will jump from 40,000 to 150,000.
Well, whatever
60.
the cost of living might be.
Anyway.
But the other statistic, since you're on that issue, is that only something like over 5% of MPs get pensions ultimately. I'll have to check that accurate. No, the average term of an MP is less than 6 years. So most MPs, in fact, never get a pension.
Don't qualify for pensions, except for Stanley Knowles and the young fellow.
And if there's ever a guy who deserved it, it's Stanley Knowles, and he doesn't want it. He wants to get back to
How is he?
He's making good progress.
Okay, calls to the man who wants to slap the banks with a $700 million excess profit tax, arbitrarily reduce interest rates, if necessary, impose exchange controls, and make Canadians financially loyal to the country.
Right on.
Your calls to Ed Broadbent after the break. I see you lost Bob Ray.
As I said, our federal loss was Ontario's gain, but it's also going to be our gain.
How long have you been the leader now?
700 years.
How long have you been the leader?
Since 1975.
You're a university professor.
And many other faults.
Qualified intellectual. And you've got the
Qualified,
papers to prove it.
disqualified,
Yeah.
pinheaded.
How can you stand the federal politics?
Eh?
How can you stand it?
Well, look,
Up in that House of Commons.
How many people have a job where you can get up every day and go and say you really believe in what you're doing?
How many?
I don't think there are too many.
You're not telling me.
So that, to me, is a very important reason that keeps me going in federal politics.
But
and
that-
we're making progress.
But that only applies to the only people with principle in the House of Commons, the NDPers.
I won't even say that. I think that there are people. That's that self-righteous thing I reject. There are some people in the Liberal and Tory party, a number of them, who have principles. I happen to disagree with their principles.
Of course, you say little prayers every night that Joe will stay as leader, don't you?
Joe and Pierre.
And
I
Pierre.
think the country needs both.
They're two of your best advantages. Joe.
I'm not going to elaborate.
Go ahead, please, to Ed Broadbent.
Hello?
Yes, you, sir.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
that's you.
Hello, Ed Broadbent?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to make a comment on your speech this morning there. It was very interesting, and I'm a Canadian, and I agree with it. And I was longshoring some years ago, and behind our, I'm out of the business right now, I'm in the public sector, but they were selling wheat cars to Cuba, which is fine. Mm-hmm. But they never told anybody about it, and I believe in Canada as a country.
What you're saying is that we should do more of our own production in this country. Is that right, sir?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Much obliged. Go ahead, please.
Ed, as long as we put lethal weapons in the hands of our soldiers with the authority of the government to order them to kill others, I don't see why we can't kill these murderers. But I don't believe that we should, actually. I think we ought to put these people, this vile creature Olson, in a room with necessary equipment with which he can commit suicide.
I don't really want to hammer the capital punishment thing this morning. One, because it's distasteful.
Well, you brought it up, Jack.
I know. I just wanted to put it on the record.
Well, I just want to ask that question. What about putting these creatures in a room and let them kill themselves? They kill somebody else, then let them kill themselves.
Well, I've made my views known. I've made my views known on capital punishment. I don't think I'll elaborate.
I'm sorry I mentioned it at all, but I felt I had to. Go ahead, please. Hello.
Hello?
That's you.
Mr. Broadbent,
Yes, sir.
you were so concerned, you and your party were so concerned that people, Canadians, are going to lose their homes, that you and your party went against the right of private property ownership as entrenched in our Constitution. As a salesman, Mr. Broadbent, the used car that you're trying to pawn off on me or the public, as far as I'm concerned at least, will not run. So can you tell me how your proposed foreign exchange controls will affect me in the event that I want to sell out everything I got here in Canada, lock, stock, and barrel, and take flight from your form of government to another country? Are you going to tell me that, well, I can go, but I got to leave my money behind because it's got to be spent among Canadians?
Well, okay, I'd like to discuss it very calmly, and I can understand your concern, sir. That in the 1960s, President Kennedy had an outflow of capital problem that was associated with the decline in the value of the American dollar. In the 1970s, a fellow named Richard Nixon had the same kind of technical problem with the level of the American dollar. They didn't hesitate to put different forms of control, but nonetheless control to protect their dollar. Now, I say to you, sir, that when we have 1.8 million unemployed, when we have 8,000 small businessmen going out of business, as we did last year, and 3,000 workers being laid off each working day right now, we should take some action to bring down interest rates, which is the single most important item to stimulate the economy. And if that means temporarily stopping capital from going out of the country, as Prime Minister, I sure wouldn't hesitate to do it.
That doesn't answer my question as to what your reaction would be to people who want to sell out and take their money with them and leave the country.
I've said there would be a temporary measure, that we could not export. There would be controls on the export of capital for a limited period of time.
His first point is one that was raised and was lost sight of. Many people are still concerned that the ownership of private property was not in the Constitution as such.
Yeah, I'd like to discuss.
Could you explain that
Sure,
to me? Was it in?
No, there was an amendment to put it in, and then it was voted out. And I'll tell you why it was voted out. There were certain conservative premiers, for example, from Prince Edward Island, who made the case, a very good case, that they wanted to protect their shoreline, their property, there for
Canadian ownership.
Canadian ownership. Americans were coming in. No one can blame the Americans, but
PEI
buying up good, in fact, almost all of the holiday property, and none would be left for Canadians. So they were concerned that if you embedded in the Constitution a property right, that might stop a province from protecting our property for Canadian purposes. And I would also say that certain provincial governments may want to move in the public sector. Alan Blakeney in Saskatchewan wanted indeed to buy up at fair price the potash industry to put in the public sector. Now, if you had a constitutional requirement that said that certain socially desirable things like that couldn't be done, then I don't think it's desirable. But
so
a lot of people have misunderstood. You know, the people, you're owning your clothes, my house and my car, all of that is protected in the common law tradition. The reason we didn't want a change in the Constitution to entrench property right was to deal with these broad questions of residential Canadians owning their own property as opposed to foreigners, maintaining farmland, for example, on the prairies for agricultural purposes was another potential desire of our prairie governments, again reflecting all political parties.
In other words, you had to leave the provincial governments room to do as they wished with the overall ownership of land within the province.
Absolutely.
That does make sense. I hate to tell you, but it does. It would be nice to argue that you nasty socialists are determined to confiscate
We have some good ideas at
private
times,
lands. Go ahead, please.
The only thing I want to know is what does that mean for an individual such as myself, who I'm 26 years old and I've never owned a piece of property. I can't own a piece of property the way prices are now. What's going to happen to me? Like, what does this mean to me? I understood that this meant that if my parents died, they couldn't leave me their property.
Oh, absolutely not. That's been the complete distortion, if I may say so, of the propaganda. There's nothing in the Constitution that would stop that. In fact, there's a lot in the provision of our law that ensure that you would have the right to get
One more segment with Ed Broadbent, National Leader of the NDP, after the break. Ed Broadbent. When's the next election federally? Likely to be?
Could be 2 years away. Your guess is as good as mine.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Broadbent.
Yes, sir.
Morning. There's no question about the fact that the majority of Canadians do not support applying the contamination and purification theme to their own sons and daughters over their use of a recreational drug safer than what the drug that the Minister of Health and Welfare says.
What are you talking about? Legalizing?
Marijuana decriminalization.
Okay, he wants to legalize marijuana. Are you in favor of it?
All three parties, unless the Conservatives have changed recently, have supported a decriminalization approach. But I want to say at the same time that does not mean marijuana is going to be wholesalely available to everyone. And I want to particularly emphasize, from my point of view, all the kinds of warnings that should go out about usage to discourage it, to talk about the need to build healthier people. And it does me no feeling of goodness, I must say, to say that in the case of marijuana, we shouldn't be discriminating against people who are using that from a legal point of view any differently from those who may get their pleasure out of drinking alcohol.
You know, I can't even get into the subject. I don't want to. Because we both know well that the excessive use of marijuana has been clinically proven to be dangerous, and you can't test it on a driver. But I suppose you're all under such incredible pressure and logic that decriminalization.
Oh, I think it has to be looked at more carefully.
But doesn't that
mean the evidence is changing constantly on it, and I think we have to look at it perhaps more carefully than we have in the past. I've been aware. I don't use marijuana, but I do drink, and I've been aware of the past studies which have showed that it was not harmful, and I've always been aware of a certain hypocrisy, saying to younger people particularly, we can drink or smoke, but you can't smoke pot, and that's bothered me.
I'm bothered about the new the Young Offenders Act, which appears to set up a parallel criminal code for juveniles from the age of 12 through 17 or 18, and which gives them the full legal rights from the first day in. They've got to have warnings, they've got to have lawyers, they've got to have formal court hearings, and the right of appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. Is it crazy?
I can't, Jack, to be candid on that one, I can't discuss the details of that legislation. I'm not familiar with it. I'd be glad to arrange for our justice critic, Sven Robinson, to come on and talk about it, though.
He's a good guy, don't misunderstand me. Go ahead, please.
Is that me?
That's you.
Yes. What's your position, Ed, on the adjustment of the crow's nest freight rate agreement on grain?
Oh, we think that the rate should be maintained to protect rural communities, especially in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. But also I've been delighted to hear that the NDP critic in agriculture in the party here in British Columbia has noted the effects it would have if it's changed on farmers in northern British Columbia.
Do you really figure that an agreement drawn up in 1897 should still be maintained in 1982?
No, that's part of the propaganda. It was modified after the turn of the century. It was set up
When after the turn of the century?
In the 1920s.
Yeah, but this is 1982.
Well, yeah, but everything that, you know, we as a party don't believe that everything that was done in the past is necessarily wrong. Let me deal with the problems that come from an overall look at the transportation system. It is not the relatively slight subsidy, and it is slight, for our prairie farmers to maintain their rural communities.
The railways can't even break even on hauling the stuff.
Yes, but the CPR, we gave away half the country with the CPR. What we need to do is to expand, for example, facilities here, but not exclusively in British Columbia, to be able to handle coal. We have proposed, instead of making a handful of prairie farmers suffer the consequences of that, and by the way, they bring in billions of dollars every year.
Okay,
and
wait
a minute, let me finish for the farmers, because I'm not from a farming area either.
Who's going to
in the trade for agriculture, in the export of grain, that is probably the single most important thing Canada exports in terms of getting dollars. We don't want to jeopardize that. And I will say that what we need to do is to expand, especially if we're going to develop resource sectors in northern British Columbia, railway facilities there. And what we have proposed, and I got the government of Saskatchewan and the governments of Manitoba to agree with this, that the federal government plus provincial governments should put equity capital in to expand the railway facility out here in the West Coast, put the money into the CPR, don't give it away as a handout, get equity in return, and we can have a modernized grains transportation system that is unrelated to the crow problem with grain rates.
No, it won't work.
Why won't it?
It just won't work. You
Why?
think that you're going to get the provincial governments to kick in money towards the
I've told you, they're
Crown
already...
corporation, like CN?
I'm sorry, there are... No, CP is the principal one here. CN can expand,
Well,
but
CN has still, they're supposedly standing on their own 2 feet now.
Well, yes, but they're a Crown-owned corporation. They can expand. What we are... I'm telling you that there are 2 provincial governments have already said, yes, it's important to have a modernized railway system. No, we shouldn't give further handouts to the CPR, which is what they want, without equity. We'll put up the capital to expand, but we want equity in that railway facility for
But the
doing
1
so.
cent a ton TONNE rate on the Crow has now been wiped out and increased, has it not?
Yes, but the overall subsidy, I haven't got my little slip of paper that I had hoped to have for you that shows that the amount going to prairie farmers for this subsidy is minuscule, and the issue should be separated from maintaining a modern railway system.
Well, you know the BC Railway is bankrupt, of course. Our own provincial railway is bankrupt, been bankrupt for years. And who knows if we'll get the facilities built to take the coal to Ridley Island.
Well, if we need the facilities built, and it's a sensible kind of public investment, but instead of giving handouts to the railways, when we put that money up, we should get equity in them.
My thanks to Ed Broadbent, National Leader of the NDP. I was going to ask you about Schreier.
He's a fine guy.
Oh, I know he is, but did he put his foot in his mouth on the Constitution issue?
I'm a diplomat vis-a-vis Governor Generals. I suspect his future statements will be more concerned about baseball and a lot of other things than about domestic politics.
My thanks to Ed Broadbent. Next, Bill Outerbridge, Chairman of the National Parole Board. After the break. I think it's safe to say that the image of the National Parole Board in Canada is not good. Many ordinary people think that they're far too easy on their releases. Day paroles become month-long paroles. Unescorted temporary absences become this and that. And the feeling is abroad that a man like Olson, there I go mentioning that sick-making name again, should somehow or other, by the system of justice, if not by the National Parole Board, have been put away for good long before he killed these 11 youngsters. Bill Outerbridge has been chairman of the National Parole Board for 8 years.
That's right.
Now, are you an employee of, I want to take this on the very basics. Are you an employee of the Solicitor General, or are you an independent commissioner of some kind?
We are an independent commission that reports through the Solicitor General to Parliament.
Now, in your Solicitor General study of conditional release, there is an appallingly bad record between the years of 1975 and 1979 on offences committed by those on parole and on mandatory supervision. Would you agree it's appallingly bad?
Yeah, well, I would agree that that statistic is appalling, yes.
Well, can we see that up on the readout, please? These are the statistics I got from, look at that, Mr. Outerbridge. 72 murders, 11 attempted murders, 35 rapes and attempts, 21 kidnappings, 114 drug traffickings, 656 other crimes. Are these figures accurate?
They are accurate, yes.
As long as I include mandatory supervision.
That is the point. Over 3/4 of the crimes that were just flashed up on the board are those committed by persons released on mandatory supervision over which the parole board has absolutely no control regarding their release.
Now, is that quite accurate? Oh, regarding their
regarding
release.
their release. We are not in the position where we can, no matter how concerned we are, hold them in prison any longer because the law requires that they go, and most of them are persons who have been denied by the parole board right up until the time that their release was required.
This is where much public misunderstanding lies. In the good old days, or the bad old days, when I went to jail on a long sentence, I got time off for good behavior. 1/3, wasn't it?
Roughly, yes.
And the moment I got my time off, I was finished my sentence.
Yes.
We had a crooked politician sent to jail the other day by the name of Makitka. He got 3 years. When can he be out, and when will he first get unescorted temporary absence or day parole for months?
Okay. He is eligible to be released by law at the end of 1/6 of his sentence on, just a minute, on unescorted temporary absences or day parole. He is eligible to be released at the end of 1/3 of that time on, which would be 1 year, on full parole. Now, to be eligible and to be released is grossly different, because the majority of people, as you well know, Jack, that 6 out of 10 people who come up for consideration by the parole board at the 1/3 point, 6 out of 10 are denied parole.
But the public...
But the law says that they're eligible.
Not to attack you, but the public is being conned. The judge says, and this was the Court of Appeal in British Columbia, 3 years. This man is guilty of dreadful offences. In 6 months, he can get out on unescorted temporary absence.
Yes,
is that
that's
right?
right.
In 1 year, he can be freed totally.
No. He is out under conditional release until the full 36 months are up, and can be brought back to prison again if his behavior is unsatisfactory.
But during that 24 months,
he's on the street. Yeah.
He's under the supervision of the...
That's right.
Of the parole board.
Of the parole board, ultimately, yes, because we're the body who can bring them back.
So you are responsible for mandatory supervision.
We are responsible for the return of persons who have been released not by us.
If you know about it.
If we know about it,
or
that's
if you know about their record.
Right. Yes.
If you get some murderer out again and charges are stayed against him, or you don't get reports, or he disappears from your jurisdiction, the guy with the murder conviction behind him is gone.
That's right. But let's make one point, Jack. If anybody's being conned, if the public is being conned, it's not being conned by the parole board, it's being conned by the House of Parliament, because the House of Parliament gave the judge the authority to give him 36 months, and it also gave us the discretion to release that person. And so the arguments that people have with regards to our release is because we have been given that discretion by the Parliament of Canada. And the other point, we exercise that with a good deal of discretion and a great deal of care.
But on the face of it, a judge's sentence is a waste of time.
No, it says that for a period of 36 months, in that case, a person will be under the authority of penal authorities of one variety or another, either in prison or on parole. And that's what it is meant for 100 years, because that's the way our law has been written for 100 years.
So as Les Bewley, your friend, says, the former provincial court judge, parole is a direct intervention, and he says downgrading, you will say changing, of a judge's decision in a sentence.
Well, that is, as I'm saying, that is something that was there before he was born and before both of us were born, if we put our ages twice, one next to the other.
Your Solicitor General study of conditional release shows on pages so-and-so about half of the 30,000 fully released cases from 1970 to 1978, only half successfully completed the supervision period without detected new crime or revocation for criminal reasons.
Well, I don't know where that came from, Jack, but that is inaccurate with respect.
Page 95, 96, and 97 in here.
They failed, well, okay.
About half of the cases which have successfully completed their supervision period, 30% of the poll, 38 were readmitted to penitentiaries. These figures are right.
But those are for parole and mandatory supervision.
But I'm making you responsible for mandatory
But Jack,
supervision.
with respect, I'm not prepared to take that responsibility. The law has not given that to me, and we are responsible for the people that we have the discretion to release or not release. And to be held accountable for the other mandatory supervision is a distortion, is absolutely unfair.
But they do report to you. You report to them, on them.
We have the authority to bring them back to prison if they are charged with new offenses or are in the position where their behavior is satisfactory. And of those who were released, about 40% of those on mandatory supervision come back to prison. About half of those who are brought back to prison are brought back before they commit another offense because we intervene.
Right. Now, you will admit a mistake in the narrative judgment in the McNamara case, will you, Mr. Outerbridge?
That was a perfectly legal decision according to the law.
Okay, background. Harold McNamara, 67, sentenced to 5 years for his part in a big dredging fraud. He was released January 24th after serving only 10 months, a 5-year sentence in a minimum security prison.
I'm saying that the law that I just announced to you, we just discussed before, says that he is eligible. Now, we may argue about the propriety of that sentence or of that release, whether it should have been done, but it is a perfectly legal decision made by the parole board after a good deal of consideration.
But it makes, let me put it this way, does that not make to the man in the street a farce of the prison sentencing system?
I can understand how people would feel on the surface of it that would be a farce because of the political implications of that decision.
Do you
but
think
remember,
it's a
excuse
farce?
me, Jack, just let's get a couple of things.
Right.
The law does not say that we must take into account the political implications of a decision. As a matter of fact, there are 3 reasons that we are asked to consider when we consider a man for release. One is whether or not he's gained maximum benefit from prison, whether his rehabilitation would be aided, and thirdly, whether his release would be an undue risk. Now, vengeance doesn't enter into that. The issue of taking into account the political implications doesn't enter into it. Now, whether we should take that into account, whether we should be sensitive to that thing, to the question of political implications is a matter that we could argue about. But I'm saying that according to the law at the present time, we consider that case as it should and made the decision.
In other words, he had a 60-month sentence, and he's eligible for release on condition.
Yes.
After 1/6.
After 1/6. Yeah.
10 months.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't be eligible for
Full
freedom
parole.
under parole, full parole,
For
until
20
he does
months.
20 months.
That's right. Now, I should also add that release like that is not a very common kind of thing. But at the same
Is
time,
there a
it's done.
move in the National Parole Board or in the government to make all paroles eligible after 1/6 of a sentence?
No, there is not.
No change
Not
in
to
that.
my, certainly not to my
Well,
knowledge.
you would
I
know
can't
if-
speak for the Parliament
No,
of Canada,
you
but
would
I
know
certainly
if
know.
anybody
Yeah,
knew.
no.
Okay. Next one. After the break. No doubt about it. Hardly know where to start this segment with Bill Outerbridge, but I want to keep to the broad understandings or misunderstandings of the parole system. I'm not going to talk, for instance, about Glenn Wayne Johnson, who was on day parole when he killed Frida Buxbaum in a lot in downtown Vancouver. Paroled twice before, broken both within 2 months. On day parole the day he killed Frida. And after he broke the second parole, convicted of kidnapping and rape. He'd only served 2 years and 4 months of 7 years when he did this murder. Now, when this horrible thing like that happens, do you just shrug your shoulders, Mr. Outerbridge, and say, oh, well, we made a wrong judgment?
I've got kids that walk the streets of Canada too, Jack.
And you understand why I'm being
course,
quite brutal
Of course.
about it?
No, I can understand that very,
Why
very
can't
well.
you just keep in the violent ones?
I wish that we could distinguish accurately between the two of them. I think our record is fairly good, Jack.
Well, look at this man Olson. I must bring 92 convictions. Paroled until 1972, 1973. Mandatory supervision revoked in 1973. Walking about a free man. And the whole system, including yours, failed us.
But the important thing from our point of view, I agree that the whole system failed, but from our point of view, from 1972, that man was never released on parole. And he was, every time that he was out on mandatory supervision, we brought him back in as soon as he stepped out of line.
He raped a man in the BC Pen in 76 and was never charged.
We do not know about that. We can't, the courts didn't take
You were aware
consideration.
of it. You must have been aware of it.
I'm assuming, I don't know his file that
He
well.
stabbed 3 times in 76 as an informer. In April 77, his mandatory supervision was revoked. 78, mandatory supervision revoked. 78 disappeared.
Well, those revocations of mandatory supervision were the actions of the National Parole Board.
But you were supposed to keep an eye on him all these times, I suppose,
Well,
right through till 78.
That's right. While he was under mandatory supervision, we have the authority to bring him back in, and we did. And in the majority of those instances, he had not been convicted of another crime.
See, what worries me is that has the parole board become such an all-important corporation that you look at all the sentences across the country and say, oh, that judge is wrong. We'll equalize it. Do you do that?
No, we do not. The
I
length
mean,
of the
I'm making
sentence...
20 years for rape here and 5 years for rape in Ontario.
Yeah.
You therefore surely must look at these and say, oh, that's not fair.
That is none of our business. What we are asked to do by the law is to see whether that person's release to the community would constitute an undue risk, and that is the major criteria we use, not the question of equalization of sentences. That's up to the judges, and we have another job to do, given another mandate, and that's the one that we do as best and as carefully as we can.
And after 1/6 of a sentence, you have the guy in and you decide whether or not he'll get unescorted temporary absence.
Yes.
Or day parole.
Or day parole.
And you have discretion. That day parole can last for months and months, can't it?
He has to come back to prison periodically, but usually 99% of those on day parole live in halfway houses, where they're coming in and out of that halfway house every night.
How many murders of the 72 murders were done by men in halfway houses?
I'm sorry, I don't know, but there were very, very few. On parole, on day parole.
Or even in halfway houses?
Very, very few.
Is it correct, as Bewley says, and I nearly fell off my chair when he told me, that when you're on mandatory supervision, you get free room and board and $22.50 a day for incidental expenses?
No, that is not true.
Not true.
Not true.
On
Because
parole,
I checked that through, right?
That is
the
not
$22 a day, as far as I can understand it, what that is the cost to keep someone in a halfway house every day.
now, do I
that
go
is
to a
not what
halfway
he
house
gets.
on parole or mandatory supervision?
You go to a halfway house on day parole. On mandatory supervision, we have no ability to be able to define exactly where a person is going to live.
But I must report to you from time to time.
That's right. To the parole service, yes, not to the board.
Now, let's get to Olson. We've covered a little bit of Olson. Olson, oh no, first of all, how many prisoners are serving life for murder in Canadian jails?
About 10% of the total population, which would be roughly 900 in federal institutions.
You've got 900 lifers.
Roughly 900.
Will each one of them do a minimum of 15 years?
It depends on the kind of life sentence that they're imposed. The minimum that they must do is 7 years. The maximum, before they become eligible to be considered for parole, the maximum that they must do is 25 years before they become eligible to be considered.
Doesn't it strike you as funny that if I do B&Es, and this guy should have been put away for life on a number of things, if I do B&Es, I can get consecutive sentences, right? Mm-hmm. But if I do 11 murders, I can't get a consecutive sentence. Why is that?
Well, I assume because when a person is given life, that means that he will die in prison unless he is released by the National Parole Board, and the Parole Board cannot consider him for any kind of a release until he's done either 7 or up to 25 years.
In Olson's case, he can ask for reconsideration after 15
After
years?
15 years, yeah.
And somebody might say, oh, he may have, of course, seen the light. He's religious already. And con you people into letting him out after 15 years. That's a possibility.
Yes, that is a possibility. The only way that it would not be a possibility would be for his life to be taken.
Now, the judge in the Olson case said I recommend he not be considered for parole until 25 years. Mm-hmm. Will you follow that, or will you still consider him if he asks at 15?
We are in the position where if to be considered at 15 for the 20, first of all, yes, we will take incredibly seriously the judge's comments, because we're as shocked as he was shocked, as the public are shocked by that offense, all right? But if he goes to a court, a panel of 3 Superior Court judges, and that 25 years is reduced to 15, what that says is that we then must consider the case. The court requires us that we consider whether we release him or not, still falls within our judgment.
In other words, for a 15-year review, he must get 3 High Court judges to say, look at him again.
That's right.
Otherwise, when will you look at him?
At 25 years.
25 years?
The first time that we could ever even consider him would be at 22 years, when he would be eligible for day parole and unescorted temporary absences. 3 years before that, 25 years.
And I suppose the heat and the furor of the day has died, so he'll be out in day parole in 22 years.
Jack, I wouldn't hold my breath.
Now, if he doesn't get parole at 25 years, is he eligible every year thereafter?
No.
What happens then?
He can be reviewed again, or the board can say, no, we will not consider you up to a period of 2 years. After that, he must be reviewed.
Do you feel badly about the parole board's record yourself?
About their record?
Yeah.
The factual record? Not at all. I feel very badly about the amount of misinterpretation that there is about it, because I believe that we are very, very careful and cautious about it. Now, let me make one other comment, Jack, that has to be done in any system which is based on individual judgments. And that is, this is a human system. It's done by people who have to make value judgments. We are very careful about the way we go at it. I think our decisions are made with the best of intentions after intense study. But when there are persons who commit further serious crimes, then I am very concerned. Yeah. And I go back and we review that again, and we try to find out whether there's any way that we could have anticipated that happens. But in terms of the way we go about making our decisions, I think it is a very good system.
Yeah, this Solicitor General's report, you took part in that report, didn't you?
I did not take part in it at all.
But this is all the material about your board.
That is material about our board, and we had representatives of all 3 units that were part of it. But there's some parts of that report that I think are very good, and others with which I disagree.
There's a mention in there, what horrifies the man on the street, and I think I can reflect him quite well, is that on a major crime, okay, he goes in for his 10 years. Let's make it 6 years. let's do a McNamara, even though he was a poor old man who's sick and his wife is sick. I understand all the things. And you probably gave him a humanitarian gesture to let him out after 10 months, right? More or less.
Yes.
You're not going to open the files to me, but something like that. But it's the other ones that bother us. For instance, the man with money and a high level of white-collar fraud, he gets treated better than the Indian with the lengthy record.
I think probably, Jack, that's true. Not because of any conscious attempt on our part, but a person who has education, a person who knows the system, is the person who is going to come to our attention more frequently than the inarticulate native inmate, right, whose language, English, is not as a major one. And as a result, there's a tendency, I think, for him to get lost more frequently in the bowels of the system than the person who is educated and so on, as you say.
So we'll take our 6-year man, right? After 1 year, he's eligible for UTA, temporary absence, and day parole.
Yes.
And day parole. After 2 years, he's eligible for full parole.
Yes.
From 2 to 6 years, you're responsible for his mandatory supervision.
Well, at 4 years, he will be released on mandatory supervision.
Even if he has a bad record
Even
in
if he
jail.
has, well, no. His record in jail, his behavior in jail is the determining factor as to whether he gets
The
out.
maximum he can serve on a 6-year sentence is 4 years.
If his behavior in prison is satisfactory, that's right.
If it's terribly bad, he can be made to do the 6 years.
That's right. Yeah.
I suppose that's... so the 6-year sentence becomes 1, 2, or 4 years.
Or 4, depending, yeah. Now, the release on unescorted temporary absence is very unusual at the 1/6. Usually it's a matter of a month or 2 prior to full parole, where he can get back into the community, live in a halfway house for 2 months or 3 months, that sort of thing. But when you get to the mandatory supervision, then that is the time over which we have absolutely no discretion.
Are you planning a new form of supervision called brokerage?
Well, I don't. That's something that came out in that conditional release study. I think it's a change in the rhetoric, a change in the name, not in the substance. Parole, you know, that's another label that we'll put on doing what good parole officers have done for the last 50 years.
Using private agencies to find employment for them.
Well, that's part of it, but that was done when I was starting as a parole officer and working on the streets 30 years ago.
Are you not inclined to agree with many people who have been around the system for a long while that all the rehabilitation, all the counselling, all the training is by and large a ghastly waste of time?
Well, Jack, as far as I'm concerned, the people who go into prison, as the majority do, and don't come back again after, they're the ones who should get the credit for what happens, not us.
Webster and Bill Outerbridge after the break. Where does Bill Outerbridge, as chairman of the National Parole Board, how many members are there of the National Parole Board?
26 full-time members.
They're all political appointments?
Yes.
They follow the color of the party in power?
No, they don't. There's a distinction between being a political appointment and being a political person with a political record. All appointments to the Parole Board are order in council. They're made by Prime Minister Trudeau, as every deputy minister in government is. To that extent, we are political appointments. There are maybe 3 or 4 of the members of the board who have ever been actively identified with any political party. I'm not one of them, by the way.
What were you before you were doing this?
I was teaching, I was a juvenile court judge, I was a parole officer, I worked in prisons, I've worked 30 years in the system.
Oh, you've actually been in the BC pen, have you?
Yes.
I mean, you've been in it.
I've spent probably a quarter of my time in BC pen when I was here as a member. I spent a great deal of time in all the prisons throughout Canada.
I don't know. I really don't think that the public is the least bit happy with the parole system, or perhaps it's the system of justice we're not happy with.
Well, Jack,
Could it not be how many parole workers do you have in the National Parole Board?
We're not responsible for the parole service, for the parole officers that do work for us. They report to the Commissioner of Corrections and have for the last 4 years.
How many are there?
There are roughly 600, I think, but I've lost track. Because
For the whole country?
For the whole country.
So you just have your headquarters staff and your office staff and people, and you rely on reports from the Commissioner of Corrections.
That's right. But Jack, let me go back to one point. You feel that people are not happy with the administration of justice. I think you're right. But the only thing I would like to have is the opportunity for the parole board to be judged on the basis of our record and those things over which we have
But
responsibility.
we don't really know your record.
Well, I'm sorry. We try our best to proselytize it. We try our best to put it out in the public.
Tell me how good you are. Forget the bucks from
All right.
Casey's. Forget my distaste with the whole system which lets a man like Olson run wild for 100 years.
That's my distaste as well.
All right, now, what have you done?
We have at any particular point in time some 6,000 people who are out on the streets on parole from federal and provincial institutions. 7 out of 10 of those will not commit any form of offense when they come back in.
You mean only 3
Just
out
a minute,
of 10 will
just a
commit
minute, yes. And that will be everything from a breach of parole, which represents about 15% of those, about half of those who will come back in, who come back in without the commission of another offense. And when you get down to violent offenses done by people who are on parole, it represents somewhere between 1 and 2%. And we are very concerned about that, but I'm just giving you that overall picture.
Let's see how well informed you are this morning, Mr. Outerbridge. How many murderers are out on full parole?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not very well informed according to that
How
criteria.
many rapists are out on full parole?
I believe that there is in that study some statistic on that, but I'm sorry, Jack, I don't have that information.
You see, because the average man on the street doesn't want to see a rapist get out. He wants him to do his full sentence, no matter how much he has conned the prison system. And you and I know how good cons are at conning
Some are
the
able
system.
to, but it's a rape on your record is a very difficult thing to use as a con, Jack, and you know that as well as I do. As an armed robbery and everything else, you may con in terms of catching religion or other kinds of things, but when you get down to look at that criminal record, you can't play too many games with that. And that's the basis upon which we start our investigation. And that's one of the biggest criteria for our deciding whether a person would be an undue risk or not.
But we are agree that 72 murders were committed by parolees and those in mandatory supervision between 1975 and 1979.
Yeah. A quarter of those, and I'm not proud of this, how can you be proud of any violent offense? But a quarter of those murders were committed by persons who were among a group of roughly 7,000 people who were on the street at that time. And I think we talk about 20 murders committed by parolees out of a population of 7,000.
Yeah, but when they come up a case at a time, for instance, I remember the guy in day parole killed a small child here a number of years ago.
Yes, I remember that.
And
well,
in fact,
too.
we had 2 cases like that. We had the Bucksbaum case, and we've got this kind of case.
No, I agree. The individual cases are things that are a tremendous source of concern to us. You know, we're part of the same community as you are, as people who are watching, and we have the same kind of concerns.
Do you lay down any laws or any parole board rules which says that in the case of violent offenders, they will never be released after a mere third of their sentence?
The law does not allow us to do that. We
So
must
therefore-
consider them. Whether they're released or not is part of our discretion, right?
Maybe the parole board, from the point of view of the public, has too much discretion.
Maybe it does.
Maybe we should say, okay, a multiple rapist or a multiple bank robber should not have the 1/3 privilege of being eligible for parole.
That is a way. There are some of the jurisdictions in the states that operate that way. One of our problems is the alternative is to release a person at the very end of their sentence without any kind of supervision, without any kind of preparation, without any kind of transition. And the concern that we have is that you will have a person more likely to commit other violent offenses at the end of that time unless there can be some kind of assistance given to them, to those that you can.
Or some kind of fearsome deterrent which will keep them on the straight and narrow when they come out.
That is something that the politicians have to decide
We have
upon.
gone the social worker way instead of the deterrent way, correct?
That is your words. I think we've...
Wouldn't you agree with that?
Well, I think what we are... I'm not sure that you are going to deter people, Jack. The problem is that the majority of people who get into trouble with the law, and you know this as well as I do, don't get apprehended. About 10% of those people who commit crimes come to the attention of the courts. Now, those are pretty good odds if you're in action, and you know this as well as I do. And if you don't believe you're going to get caught, you're not going to be deterred however bad it is.
Oh, but there's nothing. If a man comes at me with a gun, I am deterred.
Course.
I will do whatever he says.
Yeah,
If
but
a man
that's on a
says-
one-to-one, and you know it.
And if somebody says that if I'm a third-time rapist, I'm going to go away for the rest of my natural days, I won't do it the third time.
If you are satisfied that you're going to get apprehended.
Are we using the provisions of the dangerous sexual offenders anymore?
Yes, we are. It's not dangerous sex offender. It's now been regrouped into a category called dangerous offender.
And is he banned administratively from parole?
He is not. We must review him at the end of his 3rd year in prison and every 2 years thereafter. but he does not have to be released at any time.
How many dangerous offenders are out on the street at the moment on parole, or day parole, or unescorted temporary absence?
There would be very, very few, although I don't know the answer.
Less than 1,000? Less than a dozen?
There are probably 60 dangerous offenders that are in prison at the present time, and I'd be very surprised if there were 1 or 2 who are out in the street under any kind of release. And we may be talking about people who have been in prison for 30 years.
Maybe they should be.
Maybe they should. There are some who've been in prison for 40, and I don't see any time that they're going to get released.
More with Bill Outerbridge. Time for a few calls after the break. Have you responded to your public reprimand at the hands of the Federal Solicitor General, Mr. Kaplan, on the McNamara case when he said that you made an error?
No, I have not.
Do you plan to?
I doubt whether I will make any comment.
No comment?
He is certainly at liberty to make whatever comment that he may wish about the actions of the Parole Board. The facts are that this was within our mandate. And the facts also are that such a comment by the Solicitor General is unprecedented in the 22 years of the Parole Board.
Would you concede to me in public that you made an error in the McNamara case?
I would not concede to you that we made an error, because I don't know all the facts of the case, Jack, and neither do you. And what you're looking at is the public perception of what happened rather than the reality. And we have to deal with the reality.
The public perception of the basic facts is the only thing the public can look at.
I know.
We can't look at your files. You wouldn't let me see the McNamara
But
files,
we're in the position where we have to look at the files. And that's the basis that we make our decision. If we made our decisions on the basis of public perceptions of what things would be, we wouldn't be a very responsible board, Jack, and you know that as well as I do.
Public might be safer.
I don't think that would be the simple, that's too simple a throwaway response.
Yeah,
I don't think it would, Jack. I really don't.
Short, sharp sentences and keep the violent ones in and err on the side of safety. It surely should be your policy.
At the present time, we err on the side of safety. When we're uncertain about something, we don't let somebody out in the street.
Okie dokie. You still playing the horn for the press gallery?
Yes, I am.
Had to get a little snicker in somewhere. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster, Mr. Outerbridge, very
Yes.
clearly and concisely, get your shorthand pencil ready, Jack. There's these points, and then I'd like to just make a quick comment.
Make it quick.
How many members of the Parole Board are there? I understand they're appointed. Is that correct or not?
How many members?
How much are they paid? What chance would a Les Bewley have of being appointed to the National Parole Board? Those are the questions.
Good questions. How many members? How many members in the Parole Board?
26 full-time members. The salary is somewhere between, I think it's 35 and 55,000 at the present time, and beyond that, you can look for yourself. I'm not going to talk about my salary.
Why not?
Whether or not
It's public knowledge.
Well, then let the public go and get it. I believe that
It
that's
must
something.
must be 75,000
Oh
at
yeah, I'm
least.
sure it is, Jack.
Won't you tell me what your salary is?
No, I won't.
Have I got to look it up and do it tomorrow and
Yes,
say here's the
if
figure?
you wish to look it up and do it tomorrow,
Outerbridge
please
wouldn't
be
tell
my
me?
guest. Be my guest, but I'm not going to bring that thing out. I don't think it has any relevance. Now, the final point is there a possibility that Mr. Bewley would be appointed to the board? It is a political decision, and if the people were to do it, that's up to the Solicitor General and the Cabinet were to appoint him, we'd welcome.
Just a minute. Would you endorse the recommendation that Bewley be appointed to the Parole Board?
I'm going to make no comment about this at all.
Well, you got your answers. I know that one recent short-term appointment was for a good friend of mine who will be a good member of the Parole Board, Simma Holt. As I recall the figure from my photographic memory, it was somewhere between $50,000 and $55,000 for 1 year appointment.
Mr. Webster.
Yep.
Hello?
Yes?
Yes, my belief is that the idea of a jail sentence in the first essence is that of punishment. Now,
No, it's wrong. The first element in a jail sentence is protection of society.
Yep.
The second one is rehabilitation of the offender. Is that not correct?
Well, and deterrence, and there are all sorts of reasons for sentencing.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, for a comparison, how soon would what's his name, McKitka get out?
We've already gone through that. He's eligible after 6 months for day parole. He could get full parole after 1 year of his 3-year sentence if he meets all the necessary behavior and recommendations.
That is when he is eligible. Whether the result would be for him on the street is a very different matter.
Yeah, it's good to get a nice, fresh example like that, though, you know.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
Go ahead, please.
Hello,
That's you.
Mr. Outerbridge.
Yes.
I'd like to know what your stand is on capital punishment.
Oh. Look, capital punishment is a political issue at the present time, and I have made a vow long since not to make a comment in public on
It
it.
would be quite improper for you to
Personal
express.
position on it?
No, he can't do that. As chairman of the National Parole Board, he's in no position, and I must back Mr. Outerbridge in this, to give his personal thoughts, because you carry out the law. You don't change it, correct?
Absolutely, thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Webster?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I've spent a lot of time in jail, and I know the cons that go on. And personally, I don't think that anybody that does a violent crime should be allowed out.
What were you in for?
I was in for dope.
For dope. No violence.
No, never. And I've seen the cons, you know, that people pull on the parole board
I know,
and
ma'am.
everybody else.
We know that. I've seen a guy with the worst record in the country convince the Supreme Court judge that he'd seen God, and as such was prevented from becoming an habitual prisoner. Do you have many habituals in jail these days?
There are roughly 100 who are, of all the persons on what is called the bitch.
The bitch.
There are, I think, roughly 36 now who are still in prison.
And they are reviewed as a matter of right every year.
That's right.
Some of our best friends are in for bitches, and they're good old-fashioned, harmless old cons,
Yeah.
and some of them should now be out.
And most of them are.
But I haven't read the files. My thanks to Bill Outerbridge, a man with a rocky road to hoe, especially when the Solicitor General's on his back. I'll be back after the break. One report we have tomorrow is Steve spending a night in a drunk tank in Vancouver. Well, not actually in the drunk tank. He's not an offender. But we've done a survey of the detox centers in the Vancouver area to see how many work and how many are a waste of public money. It should be interesting, to say the least. What else tomorrow? Oh, a couple of others.